There hasn't been a play like this in the NFL in years. You cannot be a Bears defender taunting the fans and your team loses on a Hail Mary. He owes the entire city of Chicago a serious apology.
Sometimes you just have to lie. I'm so sorry. Don't tell people. As a paid professional, you are coming out because you're tired. What, you just can't line up and run a play? Like, then you shouldn't be here.
Do we sleep on Patrick Mahomes to an extent?
He is the golden child. He deserves to be the golden child. I think he can do literally no wrong.
Something is just off with him. Is it the dad bod? Dallas Cowboys are losers.
Washington Commanders, Chicago Bears, Jaden Daniels, last-minute Hail Mary touchdown. Is that the best Hail Mary of all time, Brian Smith?
Since Aaron Rodgers was pretty good at it, I used to always associate Aaron Rodgers with these crazy Hail Marys. There hasn't been a play like this in the NFL in years. It absolutely lit up social media. I can keep watching the replay over and over. And the fact that it was Jaden Daniels, right, who's already an MVP contender, that you have the remade Washington Commanders, and then the Bears looking like absolute idiots out there. I loved everything about it. Yeah, in the last 3, 5, 20 years, the best Hail Mary I've seen in the NFL.
Last 20 years, Phoebe, this is what we love about the NFL, don't we? Last second as well, and the Bears look like we're going to win it.
Yeah, it was so key, and I think it was more than just Jaden Daniels. There's so many questions around it, right? Why were you not blitzing, sending more pressure against Jaden Daniels? It took so long to even release the ball. He had all day. You look at the question before that, you let them throw the ball, get the out routes, get an extra 15 yards to build into that position. And then ultimately a fantastic job by being aware in the end zone, right? You think all that time, the receivers start coming to the front of the end zone. Where is anybody that's supposed to be in the back? Kevin Byard, you have Pro Bowl defenders out there. And they just left the man in the back of his end zone by himself after an interesting situation with Stevenson as well. The whole thing, it's not even just the Jaden Daniels bit. It's literally looking at every element of that play.
Because we'll talk about Stevenson in a second, the Chicago Bears defender. But Will, I want to know about the reactions that you've seen online.
Sensational. So context is the king with all of this, right? The fact that it's the number 1 pick against the number 2 pick. The fact that all the Bears fans have already had people in there going, oh, you picked the wrong guy, didn't you? Washington as an organisation, going back to when they had the previously, recognised racial slur as a name, when they had an owner who was up to all sorts of misdemeanors, felonies essentially behind the scenes, being forced to sell up. There was no way they were going to be allowed a new stadium while he was still there. They have been one of those organisations who, maybe not quite Cleveland Browns level, maybe not Detroit Lions level, but that fan base has been downtrodden for a very, very long time. And so seeing the reaction of all those Washington fans just absolutely losing their mind. I get really overly slightly emotional, like in the way that some people do when they see those videos of people being reunited with their dogs or army dads coming home or something like that. I love it when you see an old man fan or an old woman who has loved this team for 60 years, hasn't seen any success in 3 decades, and then gets a moment like this. But even better than that is the Chicago Bears fans who got so cocky about it, who had their pantomime villain in Tyreek Stevenson, who's not even paying attention to the play itself, taunting the fans in the end zone. They haven't given up a touchdown on defense all game. They think they're a top 5 defensive unit, and then they give up a ridiculous play like that. Mwah, chef's kiss is one of the best things I've seen.
I mean, we do need to speak about Tyreek Stevenson, don't we? Because that's kind of been the storyline since then, I think. Brian, it is something that he is going to be remembered for a long time. Tell us specifically what happened and tell me your reaction for it.
Well, let's start with the reaction. Absolute idiot. There's no way. You cannot do that in an NFL game. You can maybe get away with that in junior high. Maybe in high school, you're not playing the next game. You're getting benched. The fact that the Bears had to come out and say, hey, we're going to handle this internally as a team and the captains have to get involved. He's taunting the fans. The game is not, you haven't won anything. You're a professional. You know, we've seen this so many times. Last second wins in the NFL. You're playing against an MVP contender. He can throw the ball 60 yards in his sleep. You're taunting the fans.
During the play, though. That's the key.
Which I've never seen.
That's the key.
I've never seen. And that's why we're talking. Is this the greatest Hail Mary ever? Because he screwed up that bad. Then he realizes, oh, there's a play still going on. We could still lose this game. He slowly runs to the center of the field. Then he gets involved and almost, basically tips the ball to the receiver, and that's why they lost because of him. It was some bad coaching. It was going to a bit of a prevent defense, but you cannot be a Bears defender taunting the fans, and your team loses on a Hail Mary. He owes the entire city of Chicago a serious apology, and if I'm the coach, just for fun, he's not playing next week.
Do you know what's fascinating as well, though, is slowly over the last 24 hours, hearing all of the Bears players come out and start blame the coaching. They should have brought pressure.
Yeah.
Bringing only 3 on Hail Marys has been proven time and time again to be the only way they're ever successful. If you bring 4, or even if you blitz and bring 5, immediately they're in all sorts of trouble, and you very, very rarely see anything work with them. From my perspective, I mean, he did everything technically wrong. Kevin Byard did everything technically wrong. Always in that situation, you want to have a pile, but you're going to have a guy behind the pile who's there to execute the tip drill, and you need to have a defender with him. Was that Byard's assignment? Was that Stevenson's assignment? We won't know, but everyone went after the coaching afterwards. Everyone went after the coaching for going prevent defense on the play before, which gave them the extra 13 yards. They had 6 seconds on the clock. There is no way that a defense as good as the Chicago Bears should be giving up that extra 13 yards for them to get into the range to hit that Hail Mary. And that was the difference between it working and not. If they were 13 yards further back, they're going for some kind of hook and ladder, lateraling, all sorts of, even with Jaden Daniels' incredible arm, because that ball goes 63 yards in the air. Even with that, you think that's too much. You make that one play, the Bears let you make that one play, and I think Eberflus is in a little bit of trouble with his own fan base, despite the fact they've had their best start to the season in, 15 years?
But that's what happens, isn't it, when you give it away so dramatically at the end. We'll just touch upon the Washington Commanders as well, Phoebe. They have been extremely impressive, I think it's fair to say, throughout this whole year. Are you looking at the Commanders as a potential Super Bowl, contender?
I wouldn't go as far to say they're a Super Bowl contender, but they're a team that are definitely surprising and could potentially win their division, push into make into the playoffs. I think we have to take those wins, right? Ultimately, right now, they still need a little bit of extra help. I mean, you did play against the Bears, who have a great defense, and you weren't able to score a touchdown. I think you have to be able to measure yourself like that. But Jaden Daniels is a great decision maker, and there is so much promise having him for the next few years. You've got him on rookie deals, so you can put in a lot of pieces around him to help build you up and get you a chance, especially defensively, to just give him a little bit of an extra edge.
Well, promise and optimism actually is, if you're a Washington Commanders fan, that's something you're not very used to. So I think you're going to take that right now. Speaking of Super Bowl contenders, let's move on to the Kansas City Chiefs, the one undefeated team here in the NFL. Are they, though, the best team in the league, Brian?
No, they are not, but they are the only undefeated team. They are 7-0. They keep winning games. And I've been coming on this show every week and saying the same thing about the Kansas City Chiefs. When the season started and Kelsey was a little off, you could be a little concerned. Was that Super Bowl hangover? Was this going to be the season where maybe they dealt with, just a little too much and you had the injuries and they were off? They keep winning games. And this is basically what the Chiefs did last year, right? They had wide receiver issues. They had injury issues. They were being questioned. At one point, we were saying the Eagles are the best team. The 49ers are the best team. The Kansas City Chiefs just keep winning games. Even when Patrick Mahomes is not the best quarterback in the NFL, even when the offense is off and the defense is having to carry them, I still would not bet against Kansas City right now, especially when they're 7-0. They're going to have home field advantage. They have a bye. This is just what the Chiefs do.
I think the Chiefs look right now like last year's Eagles. Remember, the Eagles went 10-1 to start the season. Everyone was talking about them as like a potential Super Bowl contender. But you saw it creep in the last 2 or 3 wins before they lost at home to the 49ers. They beat the Cowboys in that game. They just shouldn't have won. And the Chiefs should have lost this week to the Raiders. I mean, when Patrick Mahomes gets picked off inside the red zone and they end up getting a defensive stop on 4 downs, unbelievable. The defense is fantastic, but the Raiders should go and win that game of football. The 49ers, with all the turnovers they had in that game, if they put together even a mediocre offensive performance, they probably win that game of football. And that's been the same every week for this Chiefs team. Brian is absolutely right. There is something to admire in a team that aren't playing well who can still go and get the wins. And the difference between them and this Eagles team, they've got Andy Reid instead of Nick Sirianni. They've got Steve Spagnuolo. They've got Patrick Mahomes. All of those are reasons to believe in them. But I've just watched and followed this league for too long to think if they don't fix that in the next 4 or 5 weeks, this idea that, it's all about January, it's all about February for them, they're going to run into a team in January who have already figured it out, and they're going to suddenly find all of those issues that teams weren't able to pick apart, A team like the Bills, a team like the Ravens, a team like the Texans are suddenly going to be able to do that. Right now, my vibe with the Chiefs is that they're going to get to the divisional round, the conference championship, but they won't make the Super Bowl.
Yeah, but there's almost this sort of inevitability, I suppose, when you're used to the Kansas City Chiefs winning over the last few years. It's almost, and we've seen it before. We saw it last year. They don't have to play well; they win. That's how it kind of feels, I think, when you're an NFL fan. Anyway, you're just used to the Kansas City Chiefs winning, even if they're not playing well. Look, last week, I apologise to Phoebe. Last week, I had a bit of a rant about the New York Giants. I will not be doing it this time, but I might have a rant on how much we've heard the following words: National Tight End Day. I mean, please, come on. That's all you hear about. Turn on the telly on a Sunday, and that's all you hear. We do have to talk about Travis Kelce, though. Touchdown. Good to see him firing, I suppose.
Yeah, it's really important to be able to be starting to get that ball rolling with him, right? We talked about how few touches he's had this entire season. Now, we go back to the overall question, are the Chiefs good? They're consistent, and they're consistently getting better, and they always find ways to adjust. To Will's point, they have the coaches there. So you look at a team last week who were predominantly attacking you with all of their tight ends, not even just Kelce. But when you then bring in D-Hop, who's able to take away some of that attention, that's what opens it up, right? They had all these receivers they had wanted that got injured, the running game, there were all these injuries to all these guys. So now D-Hop's helping Kelce get those touches that he needs so badly. And this is where they do well. This is where they start to build, and then you get a bye week, and they do well off of bye week.
That DeAndre Hopkins addition could emphasis on could be huge for this team. He's been off in recent seasons, but I covered Hopkins for years.
What's he had to play for?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
And what's he had to play with?
Will Levis, yeah.
He even basically said in his first press conference, this is the first time I'm playing competitive football
I'm playing
for 2
meaningful
years.
football for the first time in years. I covered Hopkins from the time he was drafted as a rookie, and for about a 5-year period, he was becoming one of the best receivers in the NFL. Incredible hands, great route runner. He actually does not have great separation. He creates that separation because he's such a great route runner. He's played in big playoff games before. He's had a lot of frustration, a lot of disappointment. He is exactly what they need when you have all these injuries and you pair him with Travis Kelce. He has something to prove. He needs to remind the NFL, hey, at one point, not that long ago, I was the highest paid receiver. I was one of the best receivers in the NFL, and I can still be that. And who's throwing him the ball? Patrick Mahomes.
Well, you mentioned Patrick Mahomes as well, the fastest player to reach 30,000 passing yards. Do we sleep on Patrick Mahomes to an extent? Because, I know it sounds ridiculous. I know it sounds ridiculous.
No, we do not sleep on Patrick Mahomes.
I know it sounds ridiculous, but bear with me. I think that people are now used to Patrick Mahomes. People are now used to...
Right.
Excuse
Jay,
me.
Patrick Mahomes...
He's the host now.
Patrick Mahomes is not a top 10 quarterback in the league this season. Not even close. If you had anyone like CJ Stroud, Brock Purdy, all these other kind of...
CJ Stroud's not really a top 10 quarterback right now either.
But I think he's the difference between the Texans being great and not. He is actually... carrying them. What you're seeing with Patrick Mahomes is 2 or 3 times a game, and the 49ers, he had that unbelievable scramble down the left-hand side. Twice in this game, he had throws that were just almost no one else in the league is making. But down to down, he's not the reason they're winning games of football. That's also kind of scary because you know that if Patrick Mahomes then does turn it on a little bit later in the season, suddenly we're going to have a juggernaut. But the difference between if it was Purdy or Stroud or even Allen, someone like that, is that if he was the lowest in ADOT, in average depth of target, the lowest in yards per completion, if he was relying on yards after the catch, if all of those things were true of any of those other quarterbacks, everyone would be talking about, is this a really... Like, everyone would be there'd be whispers that they were over the hill, that they weren't good enough anymore, that they were going to fail. No one has said a negative word about Patrick Mahomes anywhere because he is the golden child. He deserves to be the golden child. I love watching Patrick Mahomes play football. I just think, the idea that we sleep on him, I think it's the opposite. I think he can do literally no wrong.
I mean, in the terms of you watch him play, and you look, even if you just look straight up at the stats, you'll recognise this isn't the same Patrick Mahomes that we were used to from a few years ago. But what you're saying is, well, he might not be, but people are still giving him that credit.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason I have to caveat it, and I'm going to keep caveating with the Chiefs, because if I just out and out say they're not a good football team anymore, then you know...
Breaking news!
Like last year, their offense had such a down year, but managed to turn it on when it mattered, and their defense carried them. This year, their offense is worse than last year and more injured than last year, and yet everyone still believes that eventually they will turn it on. That's a credit to Patrick Mahomes, but also it does kind of show that there's a little bit of media kind of lean towards... Everyone's a bit too scared to say, maybe he's the reason they don't win come January. Maybe he gets into a shootout with one of these quarterbacks who is actually playing at MVP level.
He's had so much change this season, last season. They've lost so many key players. You bring in DeAndre Hopkins, but that's going to take time to build that. Midseason trades rarely work out long term in the NFL and get you that Super Bowl. We've seen some anomalies lately, but a wide receiver pulling a Terrell Owens and carrying you to the Super Bowl, that's hard to have happen. This is what I wonder with Mahomes, though, and I agree with Will about a lot of this. What is off with him? So, like, I would say chemistry, consistency. You've had injuries, but is something off with him? We've never seen Patrick Mahomes struggle for this long. It's almost been 2 months into the season. They're 7-0. I think that's why we're giving them the pass right now. But something is just off with him. Is it the dad bod? We joke about Travis Kelce, being distracted off the field. But with Patrick Mahomes, he's so focused, he's so committed, he wants to win. He's just not playing that well. I'm a little concerned about him at this point. Not that he won't find it, but something is holding him back, and no one knows what it is.
But do you not think the run game plays a part of that? I mean, you lose Pacheco early on, who is such a vital part of that offense. I mean, you can't do all the things he does. And, back to the initial question about his passing yards and what he's been able to achieve. I mean, when he came into the league, defenses were playing him so different. Now everyone plays a cover 2, forces him to throw it short all the time. So he's had to evolve over these years. And now ultimately, yes, it's frustrating. You have all these injuries, but that combination of Mahomes and Andy Reid, they're still finding ways to win. And, you look at that game over the weekend, you bring D-Hop in, he is still missing some of those throws, but he's not had a star receiver on that team in how long? I can't think of the last time they had a guy like that.
And he has to count on cast-offs, third-tier players, rookies. I totally agree with Phoebe. It's just Patrick Mahomes, for me, with their true depth chart and a star number 1 wide receiver, I'm not doubting him at all. It just always still seems off for the Chiefs, but they're also 7-0. They're undefeated. They're the only undefeated team in the league.
Can I just mention one thing before we move on? Can I defend National Tight Ends Day?
You can defend it. Go on.
It's the best holiday.
Go on.
I totally understand that listening to Scott Hansen say it 75,000 times on Red Zone on Sunday was a little bit tiresome. And every time a tight end got a catch, it's just like, oh yeah, we get it. It's National Tight Ends Day. But after you had the great tight ends of kind of the 90s and noughties, the Tony Gonzalez's, the Antonio Gates, etc., tight end became a bit of an unsung position for a while. I love tight end because a little bit like a fullback, do it all guys. They're in there blocking, they're working their arse off, and they're also making the spectacular plays. Rob Gronkowski dragged that position into the modern era, and then now we have Travis Kelce and George Kittle to a lesser extent. So George Kittle invents this day because he's like, oh, it's a bit of fun. He's taking the mick. I'm going to call this National Tight Ends Day. And everyone has caught on to it so much that this Sunday, there were 16 tight end touchdowns. In the first 4 weeks of the season, there were 13 tight end touchdowns over the 4 weeks. There were 177 receptions. That's the most in league history in a single day for tight ends. So they've highlighted the position as a bit of fun, and then every offensive coordinator in the league has gone, well, it's National Tight Ends Day. We're probably going to have to throw to tight ends all day. That's what I loved about it. I'm like, the teams have even bought into it, and tight ends are getting their day in the sun, and I love it.
Yeah, well, I just want National Long Snapper Day, man. That's all I want.
we got National Long Snapper Day here in London with Cole Kmet, but it had to take a tight end to do it.
And from an undefeated team to a team that, frankly, aren't doing as well. After the shock loss to the New England Patriots, New York Jets quarterback Aaron Rodgers had this to say to the media.
Call this a moment of darkness for this team. Is that how you see it, and how do you get out of it? I mean, because you could just stay in darkness as well.
Yeah, I've been in the darkness. You got to go in there, make peace with it. Offensively, our goal has just got to be score 30. Doesn't matter what the other two sides are doing. We have trust in our defense and teams, but if we're not scoring 30, we're underachieving. This offense can do that every single week.
You think you'd be used to being in the darkness, wouldn't you, Aaron Rodgers, with his retreat, Phoebe? Look, I want to talk about the New York Jets, and I just want to say, in my opinion, and you can disagree with me if you want, this is it now for the New York Jets. This is it, not just for the season. We are looking at a completely different New York Jets team come September. Coaching staff is obviously going to change. Wouldn't be surprised if we see a different front office. I don't think Aaron Rodgers will be there as quarterback in September. Do you agree, Brian?
I love what you just said, and I'm going to go 2 steps farther.
Oh, let's go.
I'm being serious.
Let's
Woody
go.
Johnson is going to sell the team before September.
Okay, so number one, I cannot take Aaron Rodgers seriously anymore. I haven't really taken him seriously about a year since he decided, maybe he was going to run as the vice president or whatever, and then denied it and called out the media, even though that was a true story. Aaron Rodgers, so we got the trade deadline coming up, right? If you're the New York Jets, don't you want to just fast track all of this? You screwed up your head coach. You've screwed up your offense. You screwed up whatever culture or chemistry you were supposed to be building under Robert Saleh. Aaron Rodgers, he just does not look like he's committed. And most importantly, he doesn't look like he's a leader. He's always off with this team, with the franchise, with the coaching staff. He blames everybody else. He doesn't blame himself. And then he's sitting up there, we need to embrace the darkness. He's like a cartoon character.
Good impression as well.
So this is what I would do, seriously. Trade him. Nobody really, but maybe Miami or something like that. Nobody would take him. He's not going to go really start for anybody else. Get it over with. Get rid of him at the trade deadline. Move on from him. They are going nowhere. They're going to have to rebuild. And I agree with you. Aaron Rodgers will not be this team's quarterback next year. He's become one of the biggest disappointments in the NFL.
See, here's my problem with that. And I've spoken about this on the show before, the NFL a lot of the time is about optics. And the New York Jets do a bad job at that a lot of the time. What could be worse than trading the Messiah?
They've already done worse. They've already done that there. They've already hit the nuclear button. And the biggest problem is their owner, a gazillionaire, has turned it, basically believes that Aaron Rodgers knows how to win a Super Bowl. But Aaron Rodgers has proven since he left Green Bay, he does not know how to win a Super Bowl without the Green Bay Packers. And he did in his last 10 years there. They picked the wrong quarterback at the wrong time in his career. And Aaron Rodgers and the front office has slowly dragged a franchise that was already in the mud further into the swamp.
So I'm going to say it wasn't the wrong quarterback from a perspective of, we went into this season, and certainly went into last season, looking at that defense and saying, if Aaron Rodgers plays like the 16th best quarterback in the NFL, this team could go to a championship game, maybe even a Super Bowl. Like, he doesn't need to be vintage Aaron Rodgers to get there. Brian's completely right. All the off-field stuff is complete and utter nonsense. All of the conspiracy theorists, the appearances on Pat McAfee, the anti-vax stuff, all of that is so completely unnecessary for an organisation that already have real problems, as you said, with their optics. The problem is they've essentially turned over the franchise, the keys of that franchise to this man. And I just want to give you some historical context to how bad that loss to the Patriots was on Sunday. The Jets scored more than 20 points. They turned the ball over 0 times, and they held the opposition team to less than 250 total yards. Since 1940, 756 other teams have done that, and they have gone 756-0. One team has lost in that circumstance, and it's this New York Jets team. Their defense is a complete and utter clown car, a shambles, despite having talent, and I mean all pro-level talent at every single level. And what they did was they went, oh, it's not working. What do you want to do, Aaron? Oh, they're going to get rid of my guy as offensive coordinator, so I don't want the head coach gone. So they get rid of the head coach. Jeff Ulbrich can't coach the defense anymore. They go 0-3 in winnable games against very big teams. This Patriots team are awful, and they've gone and let them beat them with their backup quarterback, with an offensive line that they've had to change every single game, with a centre they've picked up off another practice squad. They're a complete and utter mess, and the Jets still couldn't find a way to beat them. This Jets defence last season or the season before should have been bageling that Patriots offence. There should have been 0 points on the other side. But because they've let Aaron Rodgers get his dirty little mitts into every single facet of this team, everyone's bad now, all of them.
I like your NFL history lesson.
Yeah, thank you.
I think that there is another career as a history teacher for Will Gavitt.
There's some patches on these, and that'll be perfect.
No, I didn't say a lecturer. Phoebe, let's just talk about it from a coaching perspective for a second. Obviously, they've got this interim coach. How much do you blame coaching? How much do you blame personnel?
I mean, it has to be everything, right? Because it goes to Will's point. First off, you give the keys to your organization to a player, which you just can never do. You've got to have someone who's removed from the circumstances and can really see the big picture. Because ultimately, you look back to when Aaron Rodgers was with Green Bay, what made him so good was Matt LaFleur play calling for him. You give him the motions, you give him this kind of more creative offensive scheme, which he doesn't actually enjoy playing, right? So then you go to the Jets, he brings in Nathaniel Hackett, who's a guy that's going to let him do what he wants to do, let him run the offensive scheme he wants to run. You don't have the answers to all the tests. You've seen a lot and you can diagnose on the field, but you should not be the play caller essentially. And so you remove Robert Saleh, who has, to again Will's point, been an incredible defensive mind, right? I mean, Matt LaFleur just brought him back to Green Bay to help take his defensive mind and apply it to the offense. You have to see the bigger picture. And so I think the biggest issue here is you allow someone to take over your organization, bring in the people you want, use all the money and spend cap and trades, and then you're surprised that things aren't going the right way. Well, you put all your eggs in one basket here.
I mean, it's a prime example of sometimes things look good on paper.
Yes.
You know, and in reality, it's not that.
Do you want to know how bad?
Is this another history lesson? If it's another history lesson, I don't know if I can take it.
Into the almanac we go.
All right, let's go.
Just because it's a really interesting point that Phoebe raised about like the offensive scheme. If you watched the Jets only pre-snap, so before Aaron Rodgers drops back with the ball, and Aaron Rodgers undoubtedly looks slow. Did you see Devin Godchaux essentially say he looks slow, old, just doesn't look like he's enjoying it? That's not the guy I faced a few years ago when he was in Green Bay. But actually, if you watch everything they do pre-snap, they're doing all the stuff that the Shanahan offenses, the McVay offenses, the LaFleur offenses, they're doing the motions. I watched them in London, and almost on every play they had a receiver going in motion, a tight end coming inside. Like, they were doing all of the flash, but because they have like Nathaniel Hackett, it's like he's been given somebody else's playbook and has no idea how to run it. He's watched other teams do it and gone, oh, well, that motion meant that they won that play, so we'll just do that. Without understanding why you do it, without understanding what the defense on the other side is offering. In theory, that should be what Rodgers is doing. He's like, right, I've been given all the tools to make this work, so I'm going to go out there with my big brain and make this actually work on paper. And there's so much ego with him. Like, they've had games where they've been ahead and they've run the ball 15 times and he's thrown it 45 times in games that they're winning. And that's all him. That's all I want the ball in my hands. I want to put this team on my shoulders. I want to prove that I'm the guy. And, Aaron Rodgers is hands down one of the best quarterbacks I've ever watched play the game of football. From a throwing perspective, from like what we talk about Mahomes now was how we talked about Rodgers 10 years ago. A decade ago, I would have said that Aaron Rodgers will end his career as a top 5 all-time NFL quarterback. He's just ruined the whole thing in the last 5 years.
He ruined it for me. I want to just ask you one sentence. I'll ask you one question, all of you, and you've got to answer with a yes or no, and just one sentence after that. Are the Jets the worst team in the NFL, Phoebe?
Yeah. I think they are. Just offensively, defensively, special teams, they can't get it together at all.
Brian?
No, they're not the worst team. There's a team called the Carolina Panthers.
Oh, yeah.
Panthers. Sorry, we have to stick to facts here.
Sorry,
they're maybe 31st or 30th. No, they are not the worst team.
Well, let's just give it a wider context. Worst team in the NFL, then.
Worse than the tools they have.
Yes. Okay. So we'll just yes or no.
The fact that I have
yes or no? Yes or no?
No, because of the Panthers, but the fact that I have to think about it just shows how badly they're doing. Yeah.
All right, let's move on to MVP of the week. And in fact, I'm going to throw it straight back to you, Will, because I know you're very passionate about this particular player.
Yeah. I mean, I'm using this player as an example of why good teams are great. And why particularly the Detroit Lions this week are fantastic. And I'm sorry, I'm going to get into the history book a little bit and get into the stats a little bit again.
Tell us the player.
My player is Khalif Raymond, the returner for the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions had 225 yards of total offense against the Titans. The Titans had 417, right? They had 61 passing yards in this game. 61 passing yards and only 164 on the ground. If you just show me that block of the stat line, I'm going, well, yeah, the Titans have got a surprise win. They put a 50-burger on them and beat them 52-14. And that's because the Lions are a proper three-phase team. They have figured out that even if we've lost our top 2 pass rushers, one of them being the very best in the NFL, we're going to figure out how to get takeaways on defense. And in someone like Khalif Raymond, and with proper special teams coaching, we're not going to ignore that third phase. He went for 190 yards on punt returns and a touchdown. He also caught 2 passes and had a touchdown from one of those as well. And it was just, he was the shining beacon of why this Lions team get me really excited come January this year, because versus last year when there was like a bit of bluff and blunder about this team where like they had some greatness about them, but also there was a lot of the vibes are great. That is going to be great fun to watch. This year, actually, I feel like the smart football brains in the building have got that all figured out. And I think the Lions right now are the best team in the NFC, and the special teams proved why this weekend.
Let's move on to your choice, Phoebe. In fact, actually, I think we can hear from Buffalo Bills coach Sean McDermott with high praise for the Bills Mafia taking over Lumen Field in Seattle.
Did you hear him out there? I've never heard this place like that. In all my years in the NFL, been out here a number of years, I've never heard that. And that's a testament to the Bills, testament to the Bills fans, and the organization really for the tradition that they've built over the years.
I mean, Phoebe, you've got a relationship with the Buffalo Bills anyway, but I'm sure this isn't a surprise to you.
No, Buffalo Bills fans travel great, right? Especially when you're close to the Canadian border. All of Canada really Bills fans, maybe a little bit Lions as well. But I just love this. I thought it was incredible. You go there, you see the stadium. It was almost like, and Geno Smith said it as well, it was like it was a Bills home game in Lumen Field. And Lumen Field is a phenomenal stadium. You talk about the 12th all the time in terms of their fan base. And it was all Bills Mafia. And you see after the game, thousands of fans lining the stadium, just cheering for their team. And I think that's just really quite a special, moment for them all. And they helped them get that win as well. But I love Bills Mafia. They're all crazy.
I've been at Lumen Field for a Packers game there and for a 49ers game there. Two of the best travelling fan bases in the NFL. And with both those games, not only did the road teams win on both occasions, which is always lovely to see in Seattle, but on both occasions there was pockets where there were entire swathes of red jerseys or green jerseys because those fan bases travel so well. And yet, if you went down into the lower bowl, the noise when the opposition are on offense is insane. And yet somehow the Bills had so many people travel and were so loud. If you'd asked me the one stadium in the NFL you couldn't make feel like a road team's home game, I would have said Lumen Field. And yet the Bills Mafia did it. It was incredible.
Because it's kind of a weird situation, isn't it? Because when a team is known for having an incredible atmosphere, an incredible stadium, it's almost like a challenge. So when you have this team, Brian, that obviously travel well anyway, it's like, well, if we're going to go to anywhere to try and create an atmosphere, let's go and do it in Seattle.
Yeah, and they did it last year at Tottenham, right? They completely took over Tottenham. And, we see the viral videos and they're jumping on flaming tables and doing the bowling ball shot. I wrote a story about that for talkSPORT.com last year. I actually think, and I completely agree with Phoebe, but there's a flip side of that. I actually think that's embarrassing for the Seahawks because, as Will pointed out, that's supposed to be one of the best home field advantages in the NFL. Those tickets are being bought by Bills fans. They should be going to Seattle fans, supporting your team. You have a decent team this year. I feel like Seattle, the Seahawks in general, have just kind of fallen off. When you had the Legion of Boom and you had Pete Carroll, you had Marshawn Lynch, that was a dangerous, tough place to play. It's not that dangerous anymore.
Well, Jay, you and I talking from the kind of British perspective here. One of the questions I regularly get asked by people is when they're first engaged with the NFL is like, which team should I support? We all have a reason for supporting the team we do, like a familial connection. It's a place we've visited. It's like, there's a reason for it. If I'm just asked blanketly, like, I want to start rooting for a team, the Bills are always right up there for me.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, firstly, you're not a glory supporter, even though they've got a really good team. They've got a superstar at quarterback, which is always fun. But the fan base, the atmosphere, it's near enough to New York that it's like cool, but you don't have to support a New York team. Like all of the
only New York.
There's a lot about it, yeah.
the only New York team.
You don't support a New Jersey team, sorry.
Okay, let's go on to the last MVP of the week. Going to throw to you, Brian. This particular person, always a character, and look, we spoke about him last week, didn't we, Phoebe, here on the rundown? Jameis Winston, and there's good reason why he was MVP of the week.
Yeah, nobody. I can't do the
Oh,
hands, the
you're
hand
gonna eat
signal.
a W.
Nobody eats wins like Jameis Winston, and we've been on here before. We used to have a segment called What I Love This Week or whatever. This is what I love about the NFL. This is what I love about sports. This is what I've loved for the last 20 years, being a sports writer and bouncing all over America, and now being in London. Stories like this, the poetic justice. You ruin your franchise again. It's hard to keep ruining the Cleveland Browns because it's happened about 20 times where you ruin your franchise again by being the only one who's going to give Deshaun Watson a guaranteed contract. He's an absolute disaster. He's out for another season. He's booed as he's hurt. And then you have to finally replace him, even though they could have replaced him before, with Jameis Winston, who was a cast-off, who's bounced around the league, who's had some success, but never lived up to his number one pick billing. And Jameis Winston goes out, gets the win against a very good, very hot Baltimore team who's trying to prove this year that they're the real contenders in the AFC. and he puts up great numbers. I mean, his stats were better than Lamar Jackson. To get that win against your division rival after Deshaun Watson goes down, I love everything about that, and he is the MVP of the week.
Can we get another W? Can we get another?
I make it up every time. I don't want a gang sign or something like that. Yeah, he eats the W's.
That was. I regret even asking. I regret asking. Erotic. I want to stay on this though, because that's the thing about Jameis Winston, Phoebe, is that, you know, if I said to you before Sunday, oh, he's going to have a heck of a game, you'd be like, yeah. But if I said to you, oh, he's going to throw this game away, you'd be like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it could go either way. And also in this game, Stefanski hands over the play calling to his offensive coordinator, who's been let go from Buffalo last year. And I think you've got all these combinations of things. If we're going on his character as well, pre-game, he does a speech where he's like, play for the logo on your helmet. He's like, oh, we don't have a name on our helmet. That's right. And then afterwards, he's quoting Eminem. I mean, he's just so fun. But he's kind of got that like Gardner Minshew-esque ability to him, right? Where he could win the game for you, or he could totally just not win the game for you.
Yeah, I mean, he could easily be a starter in the league next year, but equally he could be, no one could want to pick him up next year. And that's the difficulty with Jameis Winston. All right, should we do my favourite time of the year? It is
Christmas.
End of show.
No food.
Let's go to the trade deadline, because we're only a week away now. So I feel like we need to discuss who needs what, which teams are buyers, which teams are sellers. So let's start with this, Will. If there was a team out there that need a player, who would you say, and which player would you choose?
Okay, so I had a kind of think through. Pass rusher is the obvious one, right? I've just said Detroit are the best team in the NFC, and I think pass rush is their biggest need. I think we'll get on to this Max Crosby idea, because I think if the Raiders were to move on from Max Crosby, insanity. But there are guys out there who are available. The fact that the Chiefs just got Josh Uche from the Patriots for a 6th-round pick, a guy who would absolutely go into that Lions team and have an impact, is just insane to me that, again, the Chiefs, the rich getting richer, the strong getting stronger. But there are guys out there. There's Darius Smith from the Browns. Maybe with that win over the Ravens, suddenly he becomes out of their league. He's out there and he is available. Emmanuel Ogbah from the Dolphins. Baron Browning from the Broncos. Like, there are players who are on bad teams right now who they could go and get for very little draft capital. I love that the Lions have figured out over recent weeks how to do it without Aiden Hutchinson. But that doesn't mean you can't also bolster that unit and make it so that we've worked out on the back end. Our linebackers are playing brilliantly. We've finally sorted out the defensive backfield. We've got a rookie in Terran Armstead who's playing out of his boots. But actually, let's just help out a little bit. So that would be number one for me.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's hear from Max Crosby, actually. The Raiders defensive end recently took to his podcast to address the rumours linking him away from Las Vegas.
I'm not trying to leave, you know what I mean? Like, I know it's a business. You know what I mean? I don't have 100% control, all that, but, like, I want to be here. I want to be silver and black. I'll say it loud and clear. I want to be a Raider. I've said that over and over and over again. But, yeah, it's business part of it, too. Like, I don't have 100% control of that, but I know at the end of the day, like, just seeing all the craziness, like, it's been insane. You know what I mean? Like, I can't even open my phone. Every 2 seconds, it's Lions fans, Falcons fans, Bears fans. It's me and an edit in a different jersey, and I'm like, what the is this turned into? And then...
so that's exactly what you want to hear, don't you? If you're, well, maybe not the last bit, but that's exactly what you want to hear if you're a Las Vegas Raiders fan, Brian. I mean, the Raiders owner, Mark Davis, as well. I think he emailed ESPN being like, BTW, he ain't going nowhere, or something along those lines. I paraphrase. But I mean, in my point of view, I mean, we can just really quickly touch on the Detroit Lions again. Surely Max Crosby is out of their league just in terms of capital anyway. I mean, you hope Aiden Hutchinson's coming back. I just can't see that's a feasible thing happening.
That doesn't really make sense that you're gonna maybe have to give up multiple picks or give up a 2nd-round pick to bring him in when
for the sake of months.
Exactly. But there are teams that the way I've always looked at this when I was covering the NBA as a beat writer, covering Major League Baseball, covering the NFL, they're all the same ultimately when it comes to trade deadlines. You're going to have a team like the Chiefs who are adding and they're undefeated and they're trying to win it again. And then it always comes down to the way that the general managers, the head coaches, but this is a front office decision, not a head coach. The way that they always view this is, we're trying to remain as competitive with somebody else who's trading within the conference, within the division. So I look at somebody like the Houston Texans, who are 6-2, who are playing well. CJ Stroud's actually been a little off. They keep winning games. They've had injury issues at wide receiver. Eventually that gets a little better, but they're trying to beat the Kansas City Chiefs this year. They need home field advantage. You look at the Baltimore Ravens, who add Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is about to rush for 1,000 yards midway through the season, but could they make a couple of changes? And then I mentioned earlier, and I'm not joking, if I'm the New York Jets, I keep tearing it down as much as I can. I also look at someone like the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys, who are below 500, who nobody believes in. They are not Super Bowl contenders. And at some point, Jerry Jones will have to face reality and get rid of a couple of these players to keep paying other guys. It's not working there. They should be a seller.
So Brian's saying Micah Parsons is on the trade block.
Right, yeah. But here's the thing, look,
you have to think about it.
I keep going on about optics. The New York Jets are very bad at it, but the Dallas Cowboys are obsessed with it, you know. And I just can't see how they would do that knowing. Jerry Jones is very aware, knowing what it would be.
A smart GM would. Somebody who's actually ahead of the curve, who recognizes where my team, my franchise is at. That's what I'm saying what I would do, what they should be doing. Dallas Cowboys should be sellers at the trade deadline. They're not going anywhere.
Well, you've been inside organizations, Phoebe. I mean, these conversations must be being had, but I don't know. I just don't see the Cowboys being part of that.
Yeah, I don't see them being part of it either because of Jerry Jones. You can't look at any other organization the same as you look at the Cowboys. Only last week we're seeing Cowboys ex-players coming forward and talking about how actually the brand supersedes winning. And if you get rid of a Micah Parsons, who else do you have, right? And so they need those names. They need those people to keep those attractions going. So it's a very odd thing because you can't actually look at the Cowboys like any other team in the NFL. But there are teams that do have a lot of needs out there. And, you hope someone like the Bills, you bring in Amari Cooper. They still need an inside linebacker. You've got the Bucks who are missing receivers. Everyone's going down. Same with the 49ers. There's a lot of teams with a lot of needs. And, there's not much time to make these decisions. But you look at throughout the year, every NFL team, they have scouts, college, NFL, every single team. They're going to every NFL game that they're assigned to. So there's eyes and ears everywhere.
It's a really interesting dichotomy between those two organizations, actually, in the Cowboys and the Raiders, in that they are two of the absolute keystone franchises of the NFL, most valuable, biggest sellers. But whilst I'm kind of with Brian, if I'm the Cowboys, they're so desperate to start winning that they should be making every move they can to try and reset that organization. Just coming back to that Raiders perspective, if they get rid of a absolute cornerstone pass rusher for the second time in a decade after trading Khalil Mack to the Bears and then doing the same with Max Crosby here, after you've moved your team out of Oakland, having already been a transient team in the past, to Las Vegas, and you still expect that unbelievable fan base to keep turning up week in, week out. Max Crosby, you saw it on that video there. He bleeds black and silver in the best way possible. The guy screams Vegas. The neck tattoos, the hair, his whole attitude towards everything. Like, he is the reason that you slap him on every single poster. So while, for the most part, teams should ignore optics, if I'm Mark Davis in the situation, I'm all about the optics, and Max Crosby is going nowhere and very soon will become the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL again.
All right, let's move on to the matchup of the week, the Miami Dolphins versus the Buffalo Bills. Let's move to the person that has potentially would be the most biased, Phoebe Schechter. I mean, is this a done and dusted matchup, or do you think actually if Miami get this, then that could really change the shape of the division?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could never say it's done and dusted because of the rivalry between these two teams. The Buffalo-Miami rivalry is huge. The AFC East, the years of history they have with each other. And last week, you bring Tua back, and he changes that organization. He changes what they can do. That scheme is built for Tua and his anticipation throws and the quick release that he has. Now, Buffalo have been cooking a lot, right? You look at what that offense has done. Josh Allen, the run game with James Cook. I mean, that is in a really great position. And against the Miami defense, that especially their run defense really struggles at time. Now, you flip it to the other side, the Buffalo run defense has also struggled against Miami in the past. Devin Achane has had a phenomenal time against them. So whereas they've been able to kind of contain Tyreek Hill, it's going to be that run game that I think is going to be such a huge difference for them. But it's in Buffalo, and the Bills fans are going to be going nuts.
Is the division done if Buffalo win this game?
I think the division is already done.
Yeah.
I mean, I just look at the records, look at the situations these teams are in. It's any given Sunday. We saw that with the Browns and Jameis Winston and the Ravens, what I just spoke about. This division should be done. Buffalo cannot keep doing this thing to where they win 3 straight, they lose a bad game, they look like a contender and they're losing to bad teams. They can't do that.
Then what are
anymore.
Miami playing for then, Brian?
Miami are playing for some version of personal respect.
You know what they're all playing for is their jobs.
Yeah.
Because
that's it.
I love Mike McDaniels. That glorious little football nerd is one of my favourite human beings in all of the NFL. But how that organisation haven't come in for more flack for the handling of the Tua Tagovailoa situation.
They have here
Like-
on talk,
absolutely,
talkSPORT.
yeah.
But yeah, they've gotten a pass from, because there's almost like this sympathy level, like, oh, he's had another concussion that's so rough, we feel bad for him, we're not going to hammer them for mishandling everything else about it.
But last year, we killed the Jets for not having a backup quarterback and ending up with Zach Wilson behind Aaron Rodgers. And yet Tua Tagovailoa, the most injury-prone quarterback in the NFL based on how many he's had over the last 4 years. And you don't have your options, Skylar Thompson, guys like that. Like, this is not a viable way. The Dolphins had even passable quarterback play, then they potentially could be around 500 right now. And let's not ignore the fact that we started off this show by talking about the Jets' horrible loss in the last 30 seconds, talking about Washington and the Bears' horrible loss in the last 30 seconds. The Dolphins had that their own this weekend against the Cardinals. That's a game of football that they should have won. And as much as I love everything in theory about Mike McDaniels, his aura, the way he is with players, like the way he is with the media, he's a lovable guy. They have to start winning, and they have to start winning post the midpoint of the season. They have a good enough roster that they, last season, should have gone on a deep playoff run.
Yeah.
And they have that horrible last 7 games, and that's 2 seasons in a row they've done that. And now they're in a position where, unless they have an amazing last 7 games, I think he could be gone at the end of the season.
But they will be thinking that they are still trying to get into the playoffs, because you could argue if it gets to a point where they are thinking this is not going to happen, then you're thinking, why are you playing Tua Tagovailoa, for example?
I think that's a really tough one, right? Because you talk about the mishandling of Tua. I mean, ultimately, Tua is an athlete, and if he's choosing to play, that is his decision. So you can't necessarily...
But is it his decision, though?
Absolutely. The organization offered him, saying, hey, if you choose not to play, we'll still honor what we owe you. So he's chosen that, and you can't tell somebody what to do. You can advise them, his family, friends, they can all advise him, do what they need to. I think my biggest issue with what happened after Tua went out is, to Will's point and Brian's point, it's about, you are not, as a head coach who's come in as an offensive mind, you were not able to adjust. Look at how many other coordinators in the league lost their quarterback. They're able to make adjustments. You have Snoop Huntley. You have Skylar Thompson. You're not changing anything. Your scheme is still fit for Tua, but you're trying to get somebody else to play that, and they don't throw like that.
Hands down, I would say at least bottom 3, if not the worst quarterback I saw start in the league last season was Malik Willis. The performances that Matt LaFleur has dragged out of him over the last 5 or 6 weeks in Green Bay has been astonishing. And it was impressive when they had a whole week to game plan. When he had to come into a game when Jordan Love went down this weekend and play like that, and they managed to scheme up that 4-for-5 drive and that touchdown-winning drive, unbelievable. Mike McDaniels is meant to be that guy and isn't that guy. And then on the Tua point, you would say that he's toughing out, he's proving he's a player, he's doing the thing he loves. It's definitely his choice whether or not he wears that halo cap, whether or not he adds that extra layer of protection to himself. And look, we are all, as much as we sit here and pick apart people's careers and what they're doing, we're all empathetic human beings at the end of the day. Who, when they see Tua scramble, doesn't immediately grip the edges of their chair and worry that we're going to see another horrible situation? Like, as a human, if he decided to retire today, I'd applaud him off the field and say, good for you.
And is he not thinking that going into this game against Buffalo, where this is where he had his concussion only a few weeks ago, right? Where he just innocuously ran into DeMar Hamlin. So what is his mindset coming to this game? What is the mindset of Buffalo coming into this game, where they're thinking we can kind of rattle him a little bit early on? Same that you do with Jaden Daniels last week. Hit him in the ribs. Let's see how he really feels after this. But not saying you want to invoke pain on people, but you're trying to test out where they are mentally and how he carries that into his games going forward.
Okay, let's move on to the extra point, and let's hear from Indianapolis Colts quarterback Anthony Richardson and why he was benched for part of the game on Sunday.
Man, tired. I ain't gonna lie. That was a lot of running right there that I did, and I don't think I was gonna be able to go that next play. So I just, just told Sam I just needed a break right there.
Tired, Phoebe. He was tired. I mean, I have never. Part of me thinks, all right, cool, he's being honest, but the majority of me thinks I've never heard somebody say that. A quarterback on an NFL team say he was tired, so that's why he was just on the bench for a bit.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to lie. I'm so sorry. Don't tell people. Say it's anything else. And I think this is
We all saw him tap out of the game, Phoebe.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's wild.
But at the time, people thought, oh, he's had that hip injury. Maybe something's happened because he had just gotten that first down. He had this big play. I think there's so many things around this, right? First off, his career over the past year and a half has been so tumultuous anyways, with him being in the game, with injuries outside of it. But also, how does this represent you? How does this represent the organization? You have to be thinking, you're an NFL quarterback. You're not playing peewee anymore. You're not in high school.
You're supposed to be the leader.
You are the leader. And so what message does it send to your teammates? Oh, Bri, you're tired? Cool. That's fine. We got you. Yep. That's not how this works.
Well, how would his teammates react? You've been with lots of players, working in NFL teams. If one of those players in your room said, I was tired, the quarterback or whatever, how would the other players react?
I think you have to be like, are you being serious? Like as a coach, as a player, there's no way that you are going to say, as a paid professional, you are coming out because you're tired. You just can't line up and run a play, then you shouldn't be here.
And there were questions about Anthony Richardson in college, and was he ready for this? He didn't have a ton of time at Florida. It was always the talent. We've seen with him the athletic talent, the running ability. He can run you over. He can throw the bombs. But is he a leader? Is he a franchise quarterback? If I'm in that locker room, I don't believe in Anthony Richardson anymore. And I think, once again, Indianapolis has serious quarterback questions.
Well, you're being selfish in that moment. You are saying, I am more important than the team right now. Me and my rest is more important than going out there.
Think about the offensive line. You have to ask your offensive line every single play, not just during the game, during practice, during OTAs, in the summer when you're just sweating and sweating, to give your all and sacrifice and keep blocking for me so I can make a play for the team. And he tapped out. He tapped out.
By the way, all 5 of you combined are earning less than I am once he gets off that rookie contract.
Out.
But would you want to play with Anthony Richardson if after that happened?
You hope that you have, for example, offensive line. You hope that you have guys that are understanding and kind, because they could easily be like, sorry, man, I was tired. I didn't get that block. Right. And you could create a very negative mindset, right? And I know it's just one off, but I think it's tough where you've had the leader who is Joe Flacco being in there, and then you see this young guy coming through. I think there's an element of understanding, right? He's a young kid. He doesn't know what he doesn't know. And so that's also for Joe Flacco to be able to go and mentor him and teach him. But I don't see as a head coach how you put him back in after everyone's heard what you've said now.
So Shane Steichen said yesterday that, they have since had a sit-down and a conversation in the quarterback room, which you imagine had to involve Joe Flacco as well.
Course.
Flacco's never been known as a big rah-rah guy, a big locker room leader guy, he doesn't deliver the big speeches or anything like that, but he is very straight-talking. If you ever speak to him, he is not someone who minces his words. He's not someone who and I imagine that they will have sat down and gone, you can't do that. You literally cannot do that, because your team will quit on you. And this isn't a Dolphins team who are already in a hole. This isn't a Panthers team who are flip-flopping quarterbacks left, right, and centre. This is a Colts team who are in a division that they could still absolutely win, even with the Texans being quite dominant at the moment. For me, the biggest problem is he's not very good. He has these amazing moments and these big splash plays, and you talked about it, the bombs. Sensational. When he hits Alec Pierce on a 60-yard through the air, unbelievable throw that only 4 or 5 guys in the entire world can make, you're like, wow. But when you actually watch him down to down and he only completes 2 of 15 passes in the first half yesterday, now that Deshaun Watson has ruptured his Achilles, Anthony Richardson is the worst starting quarterback in the NFL based on down-to-down play. And if I'm Shane Steichen, even if he hadn't tapped out of the game on Sunday, I'm putting serious consideration into starting Flacco against the Vikings on Sunday night, because that Vikings defense are going to throw absolutely everything at you, and you want a smart guy
He'll be tapping out in the second quarter against Brian Flores.
He'll be tapping out mid-play against the Brian Flores defense. He'll just sit down and say, nope, do you know what, not for me.
Do you think, though, Brian, that if it was Lamar Jackson who said that as an example, do you think that there would be this furore around what he said?
Lamar Jackson is too committed and driven and proud to say that. This, to me, is a bigger... Anthony Richardson, and I agree with Phoebe, like, he screwed up by telling the truth, right? So we always say, like, be transparent, tell us what you're really thinking. He told us what he's really thinking, but he's rightfully being punished by fans and the media. The problem is, you have Joe Flacco as your backup, who everyone respects, who's won Super Bowls, and he does it the right way, and he's 50 years old, and he's still giving it his all. You almost have to bench him or suspend him. But they can't do that because he's your young franchise quarterback. To me, it's symbolic, though. So many of these guys get rushed through, and he really wasn't ready to be a franchise quarterback, right? He didn't have the seasoning in the SEC in Florida, and he was pushed by the owner, by Jim Irsay. Oh, we got to get this guy, and he just wasn't ready. And he just told us with one word: he was tired.
Let's move on to the next extra point. I'll go over to Brian. Trayvon Diggs, Mike McCarthy. What went down?
For me, on some level, this is worse and just more misguided, the Anthony Richardson situation. You are once again one of the most disappointing teams in the NFL. You're the Dallas Cowboys. You're not winning on the field. You have this gazillion-dollar roster. All these things that we talk about every week on this show and write about at talkSPORT.com. You have a very good defensive, a very good defender. Trayvon Diggs is right after another Cowboys loss. He's walking into the locker room, and instead of being honest about it, instead of owning up to it, instead of, doing something professional, speaking of being, unprofessional, he goes after a reporter who's just standing near the locker room and basically says, you didn't play, you can't talk, on and on and on. Don't take shots at me. Then he went on of course he went on Micah Parsons' podcast, because that's all the Cowboys
Everyone's
do.
got a podcast.
Is go on Micah Parsons' podcast and defended it. And so 24 hours later, you have Mike McCarthy had to apologize for it. You had Mike Zimmer had to apologize for it. And all I know is that, to me, is so symbolic of the state of the Dallas Cowboys. He's basically responding to an in-game tweet. Like, why are you even checking your Twitter account during the game? Focus more on actually winning on the field, being a better player. And it just shows, once again, that a lot of it is it's the symbols of it. It's the optics of it, which you mentioned earlier. The Dallas Cowboys are losers. That is a loser operation. That is a loser mentality, to where you're more focused on what somebody tweets about you than actually doing the best thing on the field and winning a game.
Optics should be the name of this show, because actually take out what Trayvon Diggs did this weekend and just focus on his play on the field. This guy led the NFL in interceptions last season and in pick sixes, right? But also, he had one of the worst ratings in coverage in the NFL. That's because he is a person who embodies the Dallas Cowboys. He cares about big splashy plays. He is a guy who will jump every single route in the hope that he makes that one big highlight play, but will sacrifice what the team
He gets burned a lot.
Needs.
He gets burned a lot.
Honestly, I wouldn't want him starting for my franchise, because I think that he's not actually a very good coverage corner. But he's going to get you 5 interceptions in a season, and people see that flashy number and they get excited. They were talking about him being Defensive Player of the Year last year, and I was like, actually watch the All-22 film of this guy. He's not very good. And when you take that, and as Brian said, and then on top of it, you have media reaction to them being bad on top of it, it just compounds not very good play on the field. And it's amazing that in a week when we've talked about how shambolic the Jets are, when, the Browns managed to dig themselves out of some bizarre hole with Jameis Winston of all people, that actually the biggest shambles is the Dallas Cowboys right now, who, with a bit of garbage time, made themselves look a bit better against the 49ers. But it's the 49ers team who right now are not playing very well. For 3 quarters, got absolutely dominated.
Do you know what? I feel like we're at the end of the show, and we've just talked about 2 things that have been shambles we haven't liked. Next week, we're going to end on a positive story.
Or Jameis Winston.
Guarantee it. We'll end with something fun. Okay,
Let's do the Hail Mary again at the end of the show, just to be like, yay, we love
Wasn't that Hail Mary great? That's all from us this week. Thank you to my guests. And if you've enjoyed this today, or frankly, even if you haven't, please like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, talkSPORT End Zone, for more exclusive content and interviews.